Welcome back everyone to Nerd of the Rings. We just got our first look at the Rings of Power Season 2 in the form of a teaser trailer. As always, I'm going to break this down for us, point out the references to the books, and give some of my personal speculation. If you enjoy Middle-earth, hit that subscribe button for your dose of Tolkien each and every week here on Nerd of the Rings. Right off the bat, we get a shot of the guy formerly known as Halbrand, revealed to be Sauron in the finale of Season 1. Over this, we get the voiceover from Prince Durin IV saying, "An evil, ancient and powerful, has returned." While this certainly applies to Sauron, there's a possibility he's actually referring to the Balrog. The other thing I could see this being is a moment where Durin is rallying the dwarves to help the elves of Eregion. As we'll see, there's some bad stuff coming for them in the form of Sauron. I do hope it's the latter, as it would be incredibly early for the fall of Khazad-dûm. Next we get what appears to be black goo crawling up a mountainside. I'm pretty sure this is the black substance we saw on the Tree of Linden in Season 1, so this could be a flashback to show how it attached itself to the tree. This being a cliff face would match up with the location of the Linden tree, if that is where our little symbiote is heading. Next up, we've got Galadriel with a group of 4 elves as they prepare for battle wielding sword, dagger, and bow. Galadriel says, "Prepare yourselves," as we get a revolving shot around the group. But the big thing in this scene that can be easy to miss is the creatures in the background. I can't say for sure what these are, but they definitely look like and give me the vibes of the Barrow-wights. For those unfamiliar, the Barrow-wights come into the Lord of the Rings tale in one of the chapters that feature Tom Bombadil. In the books, these are bones of Arnorians haunted by spirits sent by the Witch King. It would make for an interesting decision since the Barrow-wights are so tied to the Witch King in the lore, and their story is a pretty distinctly Third Age tale. Still, I have to say it's pretty cool to see Barrow-wights visualized in live action. Personally, I think they look pretty legit. If that is indeed what we are seeing, it may give us a clue that Galadriel and Elrond are near the Barrow Downs. I do wonder if they'll give us background info on whose remains they're haunting though, as Arnor won't come into existence until after the Numenor arc has concluded. Next up, we have what appears to be a female character who has apparently cut their palms, and in the next shot we see a swarm of some kind. This to me seems like it could be one of those Nazgûls from Season 1, or someone who is like them and loyal to Sauron. The swarm is presumably made of moths, as we can see them in the first shot. If you recall, when the stranger blasted the Nazgûls away at the end of Season 1, they kinda dissipated into a cloud of moths. So this could be some kind of reforming happening if those beings aren't truly dead. I've seen some folks online guessing that this is taking place in Khazad-dûm, and I don't think that's the case at all. The pillars may seem somewhat familiar, but the color and the aesthetic feel totally different to me. I think the floor actually has more of a sandy look to it. And I believe we are looking at our first shot taking place in the eastern lands of Rhûn. This, of course, being the land the stranger was heading toward at the end of the last season, and the land which the Easterlings hail from. Next, we see a shot of tree roots moving across a leaf-strewn ground. And judging by the lamps and the hallways of trees, this is taking place in Linden. The next shot is a continuation, and it seems like this is probably Celebrimbor, judging by the attire and what I can make out from the face. And here on the right, what at first I thought was a tree trunk is definitely someone with a cloak. Now, trees are generally on the side of good, or rather, nobody's side because nobody is on their side, so it would be odd indeed to see trees attacking Celebrimbor in Linden itself. My guess is this is some kind of vision that Sauron is giving to Celebrimbor, similar to the one he gave Galadriel in Season 1. As for when this could be, it's hard to say. I could see this being a method for Sauron to convince Celebrimbor that he needs to continue his work in forging Rings of Power, to save the world from some darkness where the very earth turns against them. Or this could be from much later, if Sauron is torturing Celebrimbor for the whereabouts of the 3 elven rings that were forged without him. During these last couple shots, we have a voiceover saying, "He worms his way inside your mind. The rest of him slivers in." To me, this doesn't sound like a character we've met before, though we did have a recast of the Adar character, so it could easily be the new actor, who we'll see in a moment. Next up, we get a force of orcs moving through a woods, and I wonder if this could be some of Sauron's forces moving toward Eregion to make war for the newly created Rings of Power. One note here is that we have what appears to be a troll further back in the shot. After that, we get a shot of Celebrimbor seemingly in his forge, shielding his eyes from a fiery light. Smoke is billowing out of a fiery opening as someone walks through, and there can be little doubt that this is Sauron himself. Or at least that's definitely what we're meant to believe considering the Eye of Sauron imagery on display. The voiceover says, "I think he has been here. I think he has been here among us all along." This moment certainly feels like a reveal to Celebrimbor that the person he's been working with is Sauron. The next shot sees Charlie Vickers in what is almost certainly an Anatar form. Personally, I'm glad that it appears we're getting the Anatar in Eregion storyline. It was something I was severely disappointed in not getting in Season 1. I still think forging the rings out of order was a very odd choice and one that I'm not a fan of. But I'm hoping Season 2 can give fans like me something to enjoy in seeing this storyline play out more similarly to the books. The big question when it comes to the Anatar thing will be, what is the fallout from Season 1? As it left things, Galadriel 100% knows Halbrand is Sauron, and Elrond knows Halbrand isn't who he and Galadriel said he was. Does Galadriel not warn anyone else that the guy they know as Halbrand is actually the most evil dude in Middle-earth? I'm very curious to see how they work this out. Another note about this shot of Anatar. The background extras seem to be running in panic as Sauron smirks. So I think this could mean the attack on Eregion happens while Sauron is still there with the elves. Next up, we get the premiere reveal, August 29th, giving us 3.5 months until Season 2 gets underway. This shot is no doubt on the coast of Numenor, and between the G and the U of August, we can see a group of people standing on a ledge overlooking the sea. Now it's hard to say what we could be witnessing here, but perhaps this could be some sort of ceremony in the aftermath of Tar Palantir's death in the finale of Season 1. Perhaps this foremost figure is Miriel herself, mourning the loss of her father. Next, we get 2 shots of Galadriel and someone else, I think it's Elrond, riding hard possibly to Eregion. It's hard to say for certain. Then we get a shot of someone submerged in the water, and I've seen folks guessing this to be either Disa, the princess of Khazad-dûm, or Miriel. This looks more like Miriel to me and could match up with the previous shot we saw of someone in white leading a group by the edge of the sea in Numenor. Later, in the featurette that was released, I think it makes it clear that this is indeed Miriel. But the next shot cut with it shows a giant sea creature, with presumably the same person in frame about to be devoured. Now, I have 2 theories about this shot. One, I could see this being another vision Miriel is having, much like how she saw the drowning wave of Numenor in Season 1, in which case this is just some mysterious sea monster. Second, I could see this being a totally separate situation, and this creature is actually the Watcher in the water that lurks in the deepest depths of the Misty Mountains, and that the Fellowship will later encounter outside the door of Moria. If the latter is true, then this is more likely a dwarf or someone in the Khazad-dûm storyline. It's also worth noting that this person does appear to be tethered and bound, whereas the last shot, she seems to just be floating untethered. Next, we hear a voiceover saying every soul in Middle-earth is in peril. We get a shot of Disa turning toward camera, a shot of Durin III looking up through a hole in the rock, and the big one is a great stone falling on a bridge in Khazad-dûm. My initial thought here was that this could be the Balrog attacking Khazad-dûm. We had Durin IV's earlier proclamation about an ancient evil returning, and toward the end of the shot, it seems like a shadow crosses over the bridge. A Balrog, after all, is a demon of shadow and flame. And in Lord of the Rings, Durin's Bane, the very Balrog who destroys Khazad-dûm, is described as having wings of shadow emanating from him. Now again, I can't help but think it's super early for the Balrog to destroy Khazad-dûm. In the books, this doesn't happen until nearly 2,000 years into the Third Age. That being said, we were shown the Balrog in Season 1, and I've kind of been looking at him as Chekhov's Balrog. He was shown, so you gotta expect him to go off at some point. But if it isn't the Balrog, I could see this cave-in as a result of the dwarves diving headfirst into mining for Mithril. And perhaps there will be a plot point where father and son continue to butt heads over the mining. And perhaps as we see Durin III get his ring shortly, it is he and not his son who delves too greedily. Next, we get a quick shot of Elendil reaching out for someone. Hard to say for certain, but this could go with Miriel at the ledge if she indeed falls or jumps. This is followed by a shot of Galadriel reaching out, which is clearly in a different location. The lighting is very dark and has an evil vibe. Notice again we have the lanterns we've seen in Lindon. My best guess here is that we're seeing more of a vision Celebrimbor receives from Sauron, and that this is not truly Galadriel, but all part of some horrible vision he is given. Next up is honestly a shot that made me chuckle a bit as things are getting more and more dark. We see an orc enjoying a nice bloody knife. He's having a grand old time. Next, we get a shot with the camera zooming over Eregion as the text on screen reads, "Darkness will bind them." This, of course, being a nod to the line in the Ringverse poem, "And in the darkness bind them." This is followed by a shot of the 3 elven rings from overhead. We've got Galadriel, who has Nenya, the Ring of Water, Vilya, the Ring of Air and mightiest of the 3, held by High King Gil-galad, and finally Narya, the Ring of Fire, meaning this is most likely our first glimpse of Círdan the Shipwright, the original bearer of Narya and only known elf to have a beard in Tolkien's mythology. Eventually, Círdan would give his ring to none other than Gandalf when the wizard arrived around 1,000 years into the Third Age. Next, we see a shot of what appears to be the Tree of Lindon, and I'm not 100% sure if what we're seeing is the tree becoming infected, this being a flashback to the black goo taking it over, or if what we could actually be seeing is the tree being healed, which would indicate the 3 elven rings working their magic successfully. The leaves are going from green to yellow, but the rest of the trees in the background are yellow as well, so it could just be healing and catching up. There's also fiery cracks spreading, which could seem evil, but I could also see it being the black infection burning off the tree. Now that we've seen the elven rings, we get our first glimpse at a dwarven ring of power. And man, does this thing have a big rock on it. Doran the Third holding this seems to confirm that we will be getting dwarven rings of power in Season 2. Now, an interesting thing about Doran's ring specifically is that in the books there are conflicting accounts as to who gave him this ring. While it's said that Sauron distributed the 7 rings to dwarf lords, the dwarves maintain that Celebrimbor gave Doran the Third his ring directly. So we'll see who it is giving Doran this ring in this adaptation. Next, we see Arondir doing some cool twirly elven acrobatics while bursting out of a wagon and pull his bow on someone. Notable here is that he seems to have come across and teamed up with Isildur, who is last seen presumed dead in the aftermath of Mount Doom's eruption. So yeah, spoiler alert, one of the main characters of the Second Age didn't actually die in Season 1. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to more Arondir in Season 2. I thought he was a highlight of Season 1 for sure. Next, we get our first look at one of the great eagles of Numenor, as it swoops into the Royal Hall of Numenor and lands at the opening. We then see Pharazôn stand in front of the eagle and draw his sword. We learn in the books that there were great eagles of Manwë that dwelt in Numenor. 2 were said to have had their eyrie in that king's house in Armenelos. We are also told of eagles living atop Meneltarma, the holy mountain at the center of the island. They would leave and circle overhead during the 3 prayers, 3 ceremonies led by the king or queen of Numenor throughout the year. Now, in the books, the eagles dwelling in Armenelos have long gone by Pharazôn's time. By the reign of the 14th king, the Numenorians are hostile to the Valar, so the eagles leave. Now, we're well aware by now that there's a lot of time compression in the show, so pretty much all of the corruption of Numenor to come is gonna land on the character of Pharazôn. This is one of those characters we didn't get a whole lot of in Season 1, but I did like most of the things we got. I think he could be really good and pivotal to the show over the next couple seasons. As for this moment, I wonder if this is Pharazôn seizing power, or perhaps just making a declaration of war against those who blinded the queen or something to that effect. I've long predicted the show will combine the war in Eriador with Pharazôn confronting Sauron, so we could be seeing the very first steps toward that happening here. Next, we get a shot of Theo looking very sad and Isildur looking up. For the former, I have a theory backed by a shot from the behind the scenes video that released as I was writing this breakdown, so we'll revisit that shortly. Next up, we see great balls of fire launched across the water to Eregion. In case there was any doubt so far, we are definitely getting the Siege of Eregion in Season 2. Sauron and his armies are no doubt coming for the Rings of Power in full force. Next is our first look at Adar in Season 2, now played by Sam Hazeldine after Joseph Mawle parted ways with the show. I'm curious to see how big of a role Adar will play after the recasting, and whether this is part of the siege or an earlier moment where Sauron perhaps takes back control of the orcs. I did find Adar to be one of the highlights of Season 1, and Mawle was definitely a big part of that, so it'll be interesting to see how Hazeldine fills those shoes. I'm certainly pulling for the guy to do well though. Next up, we get our first look at the Stranger in Season 2. Now, I know a lot of folks think this guy is Gandalf. I'm still holding out hope that the show will make him a blue wizard. I've said it multiple times before, but it would just fit so much better with the lore, and would give both the show and the actor the chance to make the character their own, with the blue wizards having so little known about them. One thing worth noting is that in the official press release for Season 2, Amazon used the term wizards, plural. It's not definitive by any means, but I'm holding out hope that this is referring to 2 blue wizards, and that we'll meet the second in Rhûn. Speaking of Rhûn, I'm guessing that is where the Stranger is here. It definitely looks different than any place we've seen before in Middle-earth, and I've been itching to see Rhûn and its people in an adaptation for some time. He strikes the ground here with his staff, and I think this could be Nori holding onto a rope from the same well as the wind swirls around. I gotta say, this is our only potential sighting of hobbits in the trailer, and as someone who felt their inclusion in Season 1 was pretty unnecessary, I'm pretty happy about that. Now we're in the thick of quick shots to close the trailer. We get Galadriel shooting double fire arrows, presumably this is the same Barrow Wight scene, followed by a shot of orcs getting thrown in an explosion. And next we have one of my favorite things to see, Elrond ready to throw down. Now, while I loved seeing kind as summer Elrond in Season 1, getting to see him in battle mode is awesome as well. This feels like he's on his way to becoming Herald and Vice-Regent in Eriador, and a much bigger piece of the battles to come. He's leading a charge of elves, and I think what we could be seeing here is Elrond arriving from Lindon to aid the elves under attack in Eregion. Without spoiling too much, the battle for Eregion does not go so great for the elves as a whole. And I think we could get some really nice moments involving Elrond and Durin coming to the aid of the elves under attack. Next up, we have a really interesting shot of Celebrimbor throwing rings into a fire, and the dude looks like he's really been through the ringer here. At first, I thought these could be the lesser rings, but those were said to have been unadorned like the One Ring. These definitely have jewels. Now, I've tried my best to count these as they're falling, and I'm pretty sure there are in fact 9 of these rings. Could Celebrimbor, finally aware of Sauron's treachery, be attempting to destroy any rings of power he has before Sauron can claim them? The next shot sees Anatar surrounded by elves with swords drawn. And what's really interesting here is that Celebrimbor appears to be holding a mangled left hand. This was notably not the hand he was using in the previous shot. Anatar appears cornered, but he twists his hands before we see a flash of light. Now that flash is part of the next shot and not at all related to what we're seeing here. But if you look closely, right before the hands turn, we see the elves all turn their blades on one another. I think Sauron has these elves under his control and is making them turn on and massacre one another. That flash of light comes in a quick shot in what I believe are the fortress ruins we saw in Season 1. Where Galadriel and her company encountered the Ice Troll. This fortress, which is likely a nod to Utumno, Morgoth's original stronghold, seems to emanate this frozen power and makes the land about it icy. I can't say for certain what's happening in the shot before, but it seems like a group of perhaps orcs are circled around whatever sends out the power. I think looking at the book lore, the only safe assumption is that this is Elsa singing Let It Go. But in all seriousness, in Season 1, we heard Galadriel mention that this place was so evil that their torches would give off no warmth. And I think it's safe to assume whatever power is exploding from this fortress, it's not good. With that, we get the title reveal in gold. The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, new season debuting August 29th. Wrapping up our first look at Season 2. But wait, there's more. As I was writing this breakdown, Amazon released a behind-the-scenes featurette, and there are some interesting shots within. I mentioned Theo looking sad, and I think we're seeing here why. Arondir is at a funeral pyre, and my guess is Bronwyn has died. She had a couple fake-out deaths in Season 1, so if Season 2 has her starting to look in bad shape, I think her luck will have run out. We see Muriel dressed in white, possibly a confirmation it is her seen on the cliff face in the teaser. We get a line of dialogue from Celebrimbor saying he's had an unexpected visitor. Definitely a clue that Halbrand, aka Sauron, aka Anatar, has come to see Brimby. We get a shot of Durin III wielding an axe, possible the fabled axe of Durin, that I thought we may have seen in the background of a shot in Season 1. Also, notice there are piles of gold. Perhaps we're seeing the descent of Durin III into a mad state of greed. Notice he is definitely wearing his Ring of Power here. The next big one I picked up was Maxim Baldry, who plays Isildur, talking about a scary set. I mentioned this at the end of Season 1, but I think he could be forced to take what will later be known as the Pass of Cirith Ungol to get out of Mordor, meaning he will come face to face with Shelob. This certainly looks like a spider lair, and he comes across an orc trapped in webs. Plus, the storyboards behind him in this shot seem to confirm we are definitely getting a giant spider. We are told that over the centuries, many orcs, elves, and men fell victim to her. So perhaps Isildur could be the first of the future Gondorians to learn of the terror of the Efelduath. Real quick, we also see some behind-the-scenes work on a large statue for what is presumably the Eregion set. This is believed to be none other than Feanor, the grandfather of Celebrimbor and creator of the Silmarils. We get a shot of Elrond attacking orcs with a catapult in the background. This would seem to back up the idea that they're coming the morning after the siege began, and are descending upon the orcs attacking Eregion. We also see Durin and Celebrimbor in a scene together, which I'm very glad to see. These are two characters and civilizations that really need some more attention with each other, in my opinion. Here's a really interesting shot of a creature approaching an elf. I've seen some folks saying this could be a Nazgul, but I think it's much more likely this is a pre-effects Barrow-wight. We haven't even seen the 9 rings forged yet, and to have them handed out and their bearers turned into wraiths seems like way too much to cram in that quickly. The next shot shows Disa with what appears to be a Palantir. Now this is very interesting. I have no idea which Palantir this could be or why it would presumably be in Khazad-dûm. In the books, the Palantiri are rescued in the downfall of Numenor by Elendil and his sons, and brought to Middle-earth. So if this is a Palantir, I'm very curious what the reason for it being in Khazad-dûm and the plot surrounding it is. Another note from the featurette is actress Morveth Clark mentions Galadriel becoming more connected with Middle-earth and the people in it. Now these are obviously just general comments, but it would be encouraging to see a Galadriel kind of course-correcting after her pretty crazy behavior in Season 1. Hopefully that's something the show took to heart from Season 1 and is making adjustments. Alright, so final thoughts. Overall, I think it's a pretty solid teaser. I tend to agree with what John Campea says on his show. The job of a trailer is to increase your excitement level. However low or high your expectation level is, it's meant to bump it up. Admittedly, I've been pretty apathetic toward this show in the time between seasons. The last video I made on it was my Season 1 review well over a year ago. Speaking of which, if you want to hear my take on Season 1, check that out, as I don't feel the need to relitigate the things I liked and the things I didn't like here. All this to say, while Season 1 had some pretty major letdowns for me, which has tampered my excitement for Season 2, this teaser did get me more interested than I expected it to. I love the idea of seeing the Anatar story that I really wanted to see in Season 1. I love the idea of getting a rounded version of Elrond who can be both as kind as Summer and a leader of armies. Those are things I'm excited about looking at the trailer. What remains to be seen is if we can get a more well-rounded Galadriel, and how big of a role Celebrimbor will play. I mentioned earlier that Pharazôn will bear the weight of the Numenor story, and I think if Season 2 is going to appease book fans at all, Celebrimbor, his working with Sauron, and the betrayal will need a good amount of time to play out and develop before culminating in the war. I feel like this is going to be a big season for the show, and a lot is riding on how it plays out and how it is received. The visuals seem great, which was a strong point of Season 1, and like that first season, I think it's going to come down to the story and the writing. For me personally, that was the weakest element of Season 1, so I'm desperately hoping for a marked improvement in Season 2. No doubt we'll continue pouring over news and glimpses into the next season of Rings of Power as the next few months go on. But now I want to hear what you think. Are you encouraged by the things in the teaser that point us to getting more of that Anatar story? What things got you most pumped? Were there things you didn't care for? Let me know in the comments.